in Ada County. Ted, good morning to you. Great to see you. Let's talk about the DNA evidence if we can, please.
Yeah, this was a bombshell in the courtroom yesterday. Julie, good morning to you. Kaylee Coleman, a DNA analyst, was on the stand, and we had heard, remember, about this hair that was found in duct tape, so basically caught in the adhesive at the bottom of a piece of duct tape that was part of that never-ending winding of duct tape around J.J. Vallow's body. And they tested it, and she went through the testing procedure, who they were looking at in terms of known samples, and boom, she delivered it for the jury that the hair found on the inside of the duct tape that was part of the wrapping of J.J. Vallow belonged to the defendant, Lori Daybell.
In May of 2022, I received 3 DNA profiles. These were from Lori Daybell, Tylee Ryan, and Melanie Gibb. I also received several items of evidence, one of which was processed as Bodie EO1, which was a hair attached to a piece of adhesive.
What results were obtained from your analysis?
So from the Bodie item EO1, which was the hair sample, a partial female profile was obtained.
And were you able to make any conclusions based on those results?
Yes. Tylee Ryan and Melanie Gibb were excluded as possible contributors of that partial DNA profile. The partial DNA profile matched the DNA profile that was provided for Lori Daybell.
Okay. Did you perform any statistics for the match?
Yes, I did. The probability of randomly selecting an unrelated individual with that partial DNA profile is 1 in 71 billion.
Yeah, you heard Larry Woodcock outside the courthouse. You played that clip earlier. He said this is the nail in the coffin. And for jurors, Julie, you know this is huge because now it's physical evidence tying the defendant to a murder. I will say this is the mother, and he's wearing those red PJs. Could the mother's hair have transferred? Obviously. So, waiting on cross-examination for that line of questioning from the defense, but true to what they've done so far in this case, didn't go down that road. Shocking. I mean, this was an easy one for the defense to come back with to try to get this expert on the record saying that, yes, a mother's hair could be found in a situation like this. Didn't do it, so huge win for the state of Idaho.
Oh, it certainly is. Great points there, Ted. I sure hope they're going to hit that home in closing arguments, as they should, because as you know, nothing is clear cut, right? There's two sides to everything, and sure, prosecutors see this as an enormous link that could really change this trial. But if you're, a good defense attorney, you are going to challenge that and say, look, she's his mother. Of course, it wouldn't be stunning for her DNA to be on his body, on his clothing. Excellent point, Ted. Ted, could we talk a little bit about Tammy Daybell, her autopsy? Because there's been such a cloud of mystery around this, how she died, all of that. Understand, largely Monday, the Emmy addressed many things. Tell us, please, what was said about her autopsy, if you would.
Yeah, this is something that we thought the state was going to have to clear up, and boy, they sure have. They've started that process. The ME will be back on the stand today when court resumes. His name is Eric Christensen. He's the chief medical examiner in the county, and he basically went through Tammy's cause of death and his opinion after exhuming the body. Remember, there was no original autopsy here, but when suspicions started to grow, they exhumed her body, and he noted the bruising found on her arms, on her chest, and then about that pink foam. And this would resonate with the jury because they saw a photo of Tammy with this pink foam coming out of her mouth, and he said that it was consistent with asphyxiation, and that is how he believes she died. And if you believe this medical examiner, well, the guy laying right next to her is Chad Daybell, and one would make that connection, one would think. He'll be back on the stand when court resumes here in just a bit.
Stuff, as you know. Ted Rollins, what a treat it is to have you reporting on this show as you're anchoring your show from Idaho all this week. Everybody needs to tune in for that. We'll talk more in the next hour, talk more about that DNA evidence and how this may be changing the game in this case. Ted, thanks very much.
You bet.
Oh, now, my Cordies, we want to take a minute on this show to talk a little more about that duct tape and the DNA evidence that Ted was just telling about, and how this could be tipping the scales of justice, as I like to say, against cult mom Lori Daybell. To help me break this all down, I'm going to bring in two great guests. Standing by in Nashville, Tennessee, retired police sergeant with the Nashville Police Department, Melissa Pinkleton, is with us. And in Jacksonville, Alabama, forensic death investigator, the host of the Body Bags podcast, and professor of forensics at Jacksonville State University, Joseph Scott Morgan, with us as well. Good morning to you both. Let's talk a little bit, just first initial reactions you had in hearing this evidence that many of us believe is bombshell evidence against cult mom. Professor Joe, I want to start with you, please.
Hey, good morning, Julie. Thanks for having me. I was absolutely amazed when I got this news about the hair, and this is why. You're talking about putting a biological element of Lori Vallow adjacent to not just a piece of tape, Julie, but a murder weapon. Remember, they're talking about, JJ's death is as a result of being taped up and asphyxiated. This is a modality of death. It's not like just some kind of arbitrary thing that they have found here. This tape was used as a utility to bring about his death. This is not just simply him being bound. This is not just wrapping the body. This is actually a murder weapon. That's what makes this so incredibly profound.
Professor Joe, love what you just said there, a modality of death. I mean, think about it. The pajamas, it could be on the, pajama pants, could be on the little boy's socks. You could see that happening. But as you said, there's a very distinct place this was on. That weapon. I love it, how you put it, Professor. This is exactly why we wanted to pick your brain about this. Sergeant Pinkleton, the law enforcement aspect of this. What does this piece of evidence do for those investigators who are working this case?
This piece of evidence gives not 100% confirmation, but it's just another element of stacking the case against her, that her DNA is on the duct tape, like Joseph said, as a weapon that was used to kill her own child. And I was waiting for the cross-examination. The first thing that popped in my head was everybody is like, oh, they're going to say it was in her house. She has long hair, and it probably got stuck on there and transferred. And I find it so interesting they didn't go there, because I think the jury was probably, if I'm sitting on the jury, I'm waiting to hear that. And when I don't hear that, that even crushes it, that even sends the message home even more that, wow, maybe she really is completely guilty, and their reasonable doubt is just amping up and amping up. But from an investigation standpoint, it's huge. It is one of the top pieces of evidence. DNA is always the holy grail, CSI effect evidence that the jurors want. And so I think that it's going to make the impact that it's supposed to make.
Oh, definitely, Sergeant. If I was that prosecutor, I'd be waving that piece of duct tape around all throughout my closing argument. I'd get as close to her at counsel table as I could, put it in front of her face, get her to look at it. We know she's turned away when there's been a lot of upsetting images. This is big. Okay, I want to pick your brains about something else, too. Tammy Daybell. So mysterious, the way in which she died, and then the family seemed to not bat an eyelash at the time and sort of accepted it as normal. Tylee Ryan, her location. Another thing that's really, really bizarre about this is how and when Tylee got to the Daybell property, how she disappeared and JJ, was it all at the same time? So I want to play some clips for you both. Now, from the hearing, we like to highlight the best pieces of the testimony every morning on this show. Let's start with Tylee. In her last known location, and see what this tells us. This is from Ricky Wright. He is an FBI investigator. Take a listen.
The vehicle arrives back at 565 Pioneer Road, number 175, the residence for Lori Vallow at 20:37 or 8:37 p.m.
And based on what you reviewed with this data, did you come to a conclusion with regard to Tylee Ryan?
Yes. So the initial information about us conducting additional investigation at Yellowstone, I couldn't identify much of any points to investigate there other than potentially along the route traveled. And that based on the photograph and her last known proof of life, that she had, I had confidence that she had returned to this address at 8:37 p.m. And now that was our new point in our timeline that we needed to scrutinize our last known location for her.
The last known location for that child. How sad is that, Professor Joe, that they're using the box in the vehicle to try to figure out when that child was last seen, because her mother is no help to law enforcement. Your thoughts, please.
Yeah, it is very difficult, and not just that. And I don't want to wax too gruesome here, but here's the problem when you look at the state of Tylee's remains. It's really hard for those of us in forensics to try to frame that, because people want exact times in these things. We can kind of bracket it and give you a range of times relative to the state of the body and everything. But the last time she was known alive, and we've seen those photos from them at Yellowstone, where her and her brother are embracing. There's that infamous picture of Alex kind of lurking in the background there, very ominous kind of thread that runs through this. And that's really all that we know, of her. And she just kind of vanishes at this point. JJ is a bit easier, to tie back from, an investigative standpoint, and certainly from an evidentiary forensic standpoint. But Tylee, it will remain a mystery, I think, when we talk about the very specifics of when she passed on.
Great points, Professor Joe. And if we could turn to Tammy Daybell, because I want to ask you both, about her. Let's play a little clip from the court hearing on Monday. Dr. Eric Christensen, who did the autopsy on her, and talking about his estimate at the time of death.
And based on what was reported to you, when would you estimate a time of death if you can?
So I guess I'll phrase this in a couple of ways. The presence of rigor mortis, again, as I said, it will generally begin relatively quickly after death, within an hour or two, and becomes more and more pronounced for several hours, and then will persist until decomposition ensues. So finding a body that's described as stiff is consistent with the person having been dead for at least an hour or two, but could be much longer.
So if Tammy was reported as cold and stiff at 6 a.m., you would estimate her to have been dead for a couple hours at that point? At least?
In that ballpark, yes.
You wouldn't estimate her death to have been closer in time, such as 5:30, 5:40 a.m.?
No.
All right, we know Mr. Doomsday was sleeping next to her in the bed, based on what we've heard through the testimony. Sergeant Pinkleton, as somebody who's worked homicides, many of them in your years of service, we thank you for that. What do you think about these facts? The fact that she'd been dead for a while before anybody called for help?
Well, I think it's obviously very, very damaging because it completely flies in the face of his account of events and his story. And, the medical examiner was correct. For her body to have been stiff and cold, it had to have been several hours. I've been on the scene of many DOAs, dead bodies, and him lying right next to her, maybe he's a super heavy sleeper. Maybe I can give him that benefit of the doubt, but I don't really think that that's the case. And I think just even more damaging is going to be what they had found during her autopsy, which was all the damage to her body and ruling it homicide now. And so that's much more damaging as well.
Exactly, Sergeant. She had the bruising on her arms, on her chest, consistent with somebody who was restrained or asphyxiated. Sergeant Pinkleton, Professor Joseph Scott Morgan, stand by, please. More questions coming your way in just a moment. We have to hit a break now. When we come back,